year 1906 was a time of grand explorations and devastating finality. In a corner of the Amazon that mapmakers barely understood, a single creature breathed its last documented breath in front of human eyes. It was a fleeting moment, a rustle of leaves, a flash of color, and then silence. For over a century, that silence became the official record. Science is often a discipline of cold, hard facts, and in the ledger of biology, the word extinct is written in permanent ink. It is not merely a classification, it is a funeral for an entire lineage, a biological dead end that suggests a door has been slammed shut by the hand of time. When we say a species is gone, we aren't just saying we can't find it. We are saying it has ceased to exist in our shared reality. Imagine a small, humid office on the edge of the Juruá River basin. Inside, the biologist sits under the hum of a flickering light, staring at a century-old black and white sketch. The lines are faded, the anatomical details guessed at by a long-dead explorer. Outside the window, the forest is a wall of emerald, a chaotic symphony of insects. To the rest of the scientific community, the species in that sketch is a ghost, a myth relegated to history. They call it a death certificate when decades pass without a sighting. But the biologist refuses to sign it. Obsession is a dangerous trait, yet it is the only thing that keeps the search alive when the world says there is nothing left to find. The forest is loud, a cacophony that should include the creature. The premise is simple, but impossible. Nature doesn't keep secrets. It keeps survivors. This is the mantra that drives every expedition into the dense, unforgiving terrain of the terra firme. Inilu, the biologist, knows that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Just because a human eye hasn't blinked at a specific shadow in 100 years doesn't mean the shadow isn't breathing. The Amazon is a planet within our own, a place designed to erase human footprints. Before we continue this journey into the unknown, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This connection helps us bridge the gap between our world and the wild places we are exploring. The motivation is a rebellion against the finality of loss. Every year, we hear about destruction, but we rarely speak of what managed to hide. The biologist believes that in the deepest reaches of the Juruá, where the humidity clings like a second skin and the heat is a physical weight, life has found a way to endure in the shadow zone. This is the part of the forest where the sunlight never reaches and where human feet have never stepped. It is a realm of ghosts. The biologist and the expedition team have spent months in these trenches, battling the crushing doubt of searching for a creature that hasn't been seen in over 100 years. Tonight, the air is thick with the scent of damp earth. The biologist sits in a makeshift tent, the glow of a laptop the only light in a sea of darkness. The team is asleep, exhausted by empty traps and silent sensors. Suddenly, a sharp electronic ping cuts through the midnight air. It is a notification from a motion-triggered camera trap placed miles away in a remote ravine. The biologist's breath hitches. The screen flickers, struggling with the low bandwidth connection. A grainy grayscale image begins to load, pixel by painful pixel. This is the moment that could rewrite a century of biological history. The first image in 117 years is about to load. The deep secrets of the Amazon rainforest are finally stirring, emerging from the dark shadows to challenge everything we thought we knew about life, death, and the persistent endurance of the wild. Something is moving out there, watching back. The pixelated image on the biologist's screen began to resolve. But even before the creature's shape was clear, the scale of the environment surrounding it demanded recognition. The Amazon is a sprawling 6.7 million square kilometer fortress of biological complexity. To understand why a species can vanish for a century, one must grasp the impossibility of searching such a space. It is a multi-layered planet within our own, a vertical empire where life stacks until the ground is buried under 1,000 years of fallen leaves. For the biologist, every step into this green expanse is a reminder of human insignificance. We are biological intruders in a system that does not require our presence to function. The difficulty lies in the terra firma, the solid ground that never floods. It sounds hospitable, but in reality, it is a dense, tangled lattice of roots and vines that can take hours to traverse even a few hundred yards. Beyond that lie the flooded forests, where the water hides the earth for half the year, creating a shifting, aquatic maze. Humans are visual creatures, yet here, sight is a luxury. The forest is a master of camouflage, turning 3 dimensions into a confusing blur. We have failed to see what is right in front of us, because our senses are tuned to open plains, not the claustrophobic density of a jungle that absorbs sound and light. Deep within this fortress lies the shadow zone. This is the interior of the canopy, where the leaves are so thick that sunlight loses its battle before it ever touches the floor. In these cathedral-like spaces, the air is stagnant and heavy with the breath of millions of plants. Here, there are corners of the world where no human foot has ever stepped, and where the only witnesses to evolution are the insects. This verticality is what truly hides the ghosts. A bird or a primate can exist just 50 feet above a researcher's head, entirely invisible behind a curtain of bromeliads. The Amazon is not just wide, it is deep, and it is tall. The mental toll of this search is a weight heavier than the humidity. For the biologist and the expedition team, the psychology of the hunt is a descent into a specific kind of madness. They are searching for ghosts in a landscape that specializes in creating them. The heat is a constant, oppressive companion, and the insects are a relentless army testing the limits of human patience. When you spend weeks staring into the undergrowth, your mind plays tricks. Every rustle becomes a footstep. Every distant call sounds like a phantom. To look for something declared dead by science is to live in a state of perpetual mourning and hope, a paradox that breaks the spirit. This is the foundation of the Lazarus effect. In the biblical story, Lazarus was raised from the dead, and in biology, certain species perform the same miracle. They are the Lazarus taxa, creatures that disappear from the record only to reappear centuries later. It is a scientific shock, a reminder that our records are incomplete. But the biologist is beginning to realize something more profound as the grainy image finally stabilizes. The search area isn't just large, it is evolving. The forest isn't merely a backdrop, it is their protector. As the biologist zooms into the photo, the realization hits home. The Amazon is hiding these creatures by design. The very architecture of the trees and the impenetrable shadow zone are a sophisticated defense. These species haven't just survived. They have adapted to stay out of our light, retreating into the deepest cells where our footsteps are muffled by the weight of time. The wilderness is not an empty space waiting to be mapped. It is a sentient fortress that actively works to keep its inhabitants safe from the gaze of outsiders. The realization that the forest is a guardian changes the nature of the entire expedition. It is a shift. The subject of this particular obsession is a creature that seems more like a myth than a mammal. The Vanzolini's bald saki. This primate, with its distinctive shaggy coat and hauntingly human-like face, had not been seen alive in the wild by a scientific expedition since the middle of the 20th century. For over 60 years, it existed only as a series of dusty skins in museum drawers. It was a species defined by its absence. Habitat loss and the silence of the Jurua River basin had swallowed it whole, leading the scientific community to believe the Saki had finally succumbed to a changing world. It was a ghost species, yet the biologist refused to accept its death certificate. The expedition to find it was a low-budget, high-stakes gamble into the heart of the Juruá. This region is a labyrinth of winding waterways and flooded forests where trees grow out of the dark water. The physical struggle was unrelenting. The team moved through liquid mud and razor-sharp grasses that sliced through clothing. The heat was a living entity, a heavy blanket that smothered every breath, while the mosquitoes arrived in clouds so dense they blurred the horizon. Each day was a grueling cycle of paddling through narrow channels and climbing through the tangled undergrowth to check camera traps that had been placed weeks prior. Weeks passed, and the initial excitement began to curdle into a bitter, weary doubt. They saw plenty of life, but it was the wrong life. They documented common capuchins and howler monkeys, but the bald saki remained elusive. The biologist watched as the morale of the researchers began to fray. They were chasing a phantom, spending precious resources on a creature that likely no longer existed. In the quiet hours of the night, even the biologist felt the cold touch of uncertainty. Perhaps the critics were right. Perhaps extinction was exactly what it claimed to be. A door that only opens one way. Then came the turning point. It was a Tuesday afternoon, heavy with the promise of rain. The team was reviewing footage from cameras positioned deep within an unmapped ravine. The first few files were disappointing. But then, a flash of motion caught the biologist's eye. A large, dark shape moved across the screen with a heavy, deliberate grace. The biologist paused the video, his heart hammering. He zoomed in, the pixels holding their secrets long enough to reveal the truth. There, clinging to a liana, was a primate with a thick, shaggy coat of gold-tipped fur and a face of ancient intelligence. It was a Vanzolini's bald saki. The air in the tent vanished as the realization took hold. This wasn't just a fleeting glimpse. It was an undeniable record of survival. But the climax was yet to come. As the video played, another shape emerged from the shadows. It was a second saki, identical in its features. They weren't just looking at a lone survivor. They were looking at a breeding pair. The scientific verification was overwhelming. This was a functional, living population hidden in a sector of the Juruá that had been written off as a biological graveyard for decades. The discovery sent a shockwave through the team, replacing exhaustion with a frantic energy. They had done the impossible. They had pulled a species back from the absolute abyss. Yet as the biologist stared at the screen, a new question took root in his tired mind. If a primate this large could hide for over half a century, what else was waiting in the shadows? If they were wrong about the saki, how many others were residing in sectors humans marked as dead? The forest had kept this secret well, and the discovery opened a door to a much larger, darker mystery. The map of life was being constantly redrawn within the deep green mist of a vertical world we thought we understood, raising a terrifying possibility about what still watches from the corners of our own planet. The discovery of the Vanzolini's bald saki had fundamentally altered the biologist's perspective on the forest. It was no longer a matter of simple observation. It was a realization that human presence was the primary obstacle to discovery. The expedition team understood that their own senses were too loud and too limited to navigate the layered secrets of the Amazon. To find the ghosts of the Juruá River basin, they needed to stop acting like intruders and start behaving like the environment itself. Tireless, patient, and invisible. This marked the beginning of a technological revolution, a transition from boots on the ground to digital eyes in the trees that would forever change the search for the lost. The first phase of this digital war was the deployment of advanced camera traps. These were not the bulky, clicking units of a decade ago. These were sophisticated infrared observers that could remain dormant in the humid darkness for months, triggered only by the subtle heat signatures of living creatures. They didn't sleep, they didn't require food, and they didn't breathe out the carbon dioxide that often alerted cautious predators to a human interloper. The biologist spent grueling days climbing into the high canopy, anchoring these digital sentinels to the massive trunks of ancient mahoganies. As the data began to trickle back to the base camp, it revealed a world of nocturnal activity that vanished whenever a human foot touched the soil. The forest was finally speaking because it thought no one was listening. However, even the most patient cameras had their limitations. To truly peer into the unknown, the biologist turned to the cutting-edge science of environmental DNA, or eDNA. For the expedition team, this felt like capturing magic in a bottle. By simply sampling a liter of water from a remote tributary or filtering the humid air near a hidden salt lick, they could collect the microscopic genetic fingerprints of every living thing that had passed through the area in the previous days. They were no longer hunting for a physical animal. They were hunting for its ghost in the genetic code. A single vial of murky water could contain the sequence of a jaguar, a rare sloth, or perhaps the blueprint of a species that hadn't been officially documented since the early 20th century. It was a breakthrough that allowed them to map the inhabitants of the Amazon without ever laying eyes on them. As the eDNA results began to suggest a level of biodiversity that defied existing scientific records, the biologist introduced the most powerful tool in their arsenal: LiDAR mapping. From a low-flying aircraft, billions of laser pulses were fired toward the forest floor. These lasers didn't just see the canopy, they saw through it. On the expedition team's monitors, the impenetrable green wall of the Amazon began to dissolve into a digital wireframe. The trees were virtually stripped away, revealing the secret topography of the land beneath. They saw ancient animal highways that had been carved over millennia, hidden watering holes tucked into depressions invisible to satellites, and the skeletal remains of geographic features that looked entirely different from the ground. There was a profound irony in this process that the biologist often reflected upon during the long, sweltering nights in the camp. They were using the most advanced silicon-based technology humanity had ever produced: lasers, infrared sensors, and complex genetic sequences, just to find the most primitive and ancient biological life on the planet. It was a direct collision between a high-tech future and a prehistoric past. The machines were cold and unfeeling, yet they were the only tools capable of tracking the warm, vibrant reality of survival in the deep wilderness. They were trying to bridge a gap of a century using light and code. The true revelation of this digital escalation arrived during a routine scan of the deeper Tapajos region. As the LiDAR data processed on the biologist's laptop, a massive, unmapped topographical feature began to materialize on the screen. It wasn't just a hill or a river bend. It was a vast, isolated valley, shielded by sheer rock faces and a nearly vertical wall of ancient forest. This hidden valley was a natural sanctuary, a place so geographically fortified that it had likely remained undisturbed by human interference for centuries. The biologist stared at the glowing 3D model, his pulse quickening. This wasn't just a place where species survived, it was an evolutionary fortress. The digital eyes had found a sanctuary where the word extinction had no meaning, and the data suggested that whatever was living inside would challenge everything science knew about the limits of the natural world. The discovery of the hidden valley was a tectonic shift in the expedition's mission, highlighting a chilling truth about the Amazon's most elusive residents. Among the digital shadows caught by the infrared sensors, one creature stood out: the short-eared dog. Often called the ghost dog by those few locals who have glimpsed its fleeting form, this animal is one of the most mysterious canids on Earth. It moves through the undergrowth with feline grace, its dark fur blending perfectly with the damp, heavy shadows of the forest floor. To the biologist, the ghost dog was a living testament to the forest's ability to harbor large predators right under the nose of modern civilization. If a mammal of this size could remain a phantom for centuries, then the true scale of the Amazon's biodiversity was likely 10 times what current models suggested. This realization brought a sense of dizzying scale to the team's work. They weren't just looking for individual species, they were peeling back the lid on a biological engine that operated in a dimension humans simply couldn't access. Every tree in the hidden valley was a vertical continent, hosting thousands of unique lineages that had never seen a laboratory. Yet this wonder was tempered by a brutal reality. The race against time was no longer a metaphor. As the team documented these Lazarus species, the forest was increasingly punctuated by the distant thud of illegal logging and the toxic, mercury-laden sludge of wildcat mining operations creeping toward the valley's edges. The last hiding spots were being burned and poisoned faster than they could be mapped, threatening to erase these ghosts before they were even officially acknowledged. The biologist found himself trapped in a paralyzing moral dilemma that kept him awake long after the camp's generators were silenced. Scientific protocol dictated that these discoveries must be published to ensure the legal protection of the habitat. However, he knew the dark side of human curiosity. Once a lost species is officially found, it gains a value beyond its biological niche, becoming a target for high-end poachers. To announce the existence of this pristine sanctuary was to paint a target on its back. The act of naming a creature could become its death warrant. He stared at the glowing coordinates of the hidden valley on his screen, wondering if the greatest service he could provide was to delete the data and let the forest keep its secrets for another century. The mystery deepened when the team cross-referenced their findings with local folklore from the Tapajos region. For generations, indigenous communities had spoken of creatures that Western science dismissed as mythological, spirits of the canopy and shapeshifters that could vanish at will. But as the biologist looked at the thermal signatures and eDNA traces, he began to see the biological reality behind these ancient myths. What the locals called a forest spirit might actually be a misidentified extinct animal, one that had adapted so perfectly to the shadows that its behavior appeared supernatural. The lines between legend and biology were blurring, suggesting that the monsters of the past were simply the survivors of a world we had forgotten how to see, thriving in the spaces between our modern maps and digital eyes. As the rainy season began to roll in, a final, unexpected folder of images arrived from the deepest camera traps in the valley. The biologist opened the file with trembling hands, expecting more ghost dogs or primates. Instead, the screen filled with shapes that defied every known classification. The creatures in the grainy, midnight purple frames possessed anatomical features that didn't match any known record, living or fossilized. They moved with a strange, prehistoric gait, their eyes reflecting the infrared light with a haunting intensity. They weren't just survivors. They were something entirely new, or perhaps something so old that humanity had no name for it. The data pointed toward a branch of life that had evolved in complete isolation, watching the world change from the safety of the emerald dark. The biologist sat in the humid silence of the camp, his eyes fixed on the flickering screen, where the final images from the Tapajos Valley continued to loop. The shapes were alien, yet ancient, a biological riddle that seemed to mock the very foundations of modern taxonomy. He realized then that the expedition had never truly been about finding lost species. It was about confronting the profound limits of human knowledge. The Lazarus species they had documented, the Vanzolini's bald saki, the elusive short-eared dog, and the unclassifiable phantoms of the deep valley, were not miracles of resurrection. They were simply survivors of a world that didn't need human acknowledgement to exist. For over a century, science had written their obituaries based on the arrogance of a species that believed if it couldn't see something, that thing must be dead. The biologist felt a wave of humility wash over him. He had spent his life trying to be a master of the earth, a cataloger of life who could define the boundaries of existence. But the Amazon had stripped that illusion away. He and his expedition team were not masters. They were clueless observers, peeking through a keyhole into a vast, darkened room where the inhabitants had lived for millennia without a sound. The forest was not a resource to be mapped or a puzzle to be solved. It was a sentient, evolving fortress that had developed its own defense mechanisms against the prying eyes of a destructive civilization. The synthesis of their findings pointed toward a terrifyingly beautiful conclusion. If a dozen species previously declared extinct could thrive in the shadows, then the mathematical probability of what remained undiscovered was staggering. They weren't just missing a few birds or insects. They were missing entire chapters of the evolutionary story. The shadow zone of the canopy and the terra firma floors were not empty spaces. They were crowded with life that had learned to be invisible. This realization shifted the mission from discovery to profound responsibility. Every rediscovered species represented a second chance that humanity did not deserve. Each creature was a fragile link in a chain that had almost been severed by greed. But with that second chance came a grim warning. The biologist looked at the maps showing the encroaching scars of illegal mining and the orange glow of distant fires. The very technology that allowed them to find these treasures, the LiDAR and the eDNA, also made the locations vulnerable. The moral dilemma that had haunted him since finding the hidden valley now reached a fever pitch. To protect these creatures, must he lie? Must he bury the data and let the scientific community believe the forests were empty? He understood now that the greatest act of conservation might not be a published paper, but a deliberate, protective silence. The forest had kept these secrets for millions of years. Perhaps it was time for humanity to learn the same discipline. The final question weighed heavy as he prepared to dismantle the camp. If they were wrong about 7 species, how many thousands more were still watching them from the emerald shadows? How many eyes were reflecting the infrared light right now, belonging to creatures that had no names? The Amazon was not a dying wilderness, it was a defiant one. It was a place where the past was still alive, breathing in the damp heat. We were never the explorers. We were the ones being explored by an environment that had mastered the art of the vanishing act. The biologist took one last look at the dark wall of trees before stepping into the transport. In his mind, he imagined a cinematic zoom-out, rising above the camp, above the Juruá River, and into the atmosphere. From the perspective of a satellite, the Amazon appeared as a solid ocean of green. The lights of the distant cities were mere pinpricks of artificial warmth against the ancient darkness of the basin. The expedition was over, but the mystery was only beginning. Tomorrow, we go deeper. Not into what is hidden, but how it managed to hide for so long. The great unknown was not a void, it was a presence. And as the forest swallowed their footprints, the biologist knew that the shadows were full, and the story was far from finished.